Hello, missional communities, mission friends at Roseville Covenant Church. I'm so excited that so many of you are embarking on this project together to build deeper community here in our congregation through missional communities. God did not make human beings for isolation. He gave us one another, and God did not call the church to be holy persons, but holy people. The Christian life is not a solo sport. And the uniquely Christian thing about community and relationships in the church is that they cross boundaries for greater purposes beyond even just friendship and kinship, but divine purposes. We really do believe that when we love each other and serve together and spur one another on to greater faith and greater discipleship, we, in the words of the Apostle Paul to the Romans, we glorify God with one mind and one voice, that we have this encouragement to come closer to Christ and closer to God. You might be wondering a little bit more about why we call these missional communities. We're trying to be intentional and thoughtful about what we call this ministry and what we're aiming to do, because in some ways we are trying to break the mold a little bit of what people will often think of as small groups. You know, small groups are generally places where we experience connection and relationship, and we have people around us who become our helpers and our encouragers, and we find in one another examples and models to emulate, people to pray with and confess with. So in that sense, a missional community is very much like a small group. It's places for us as participants to be enriched in our social life and our faith, but that's not all we want these communities to become. One of the potential pitfalls of small groups is that they can sometimes become somewhat insular or consumer-minded, and we start to view small groups as sort of services unto ourselves. So our hope is that these smaller communities will be vehicles for outreach and service to more of our neighbors, including those outside the walls of our church. It's one of our hopes is that every missional community will be committing itself to some act of semi-regular volunteering. Maybe that would be, once a quarter serving a meal on Wednesday night to the kids who gather for Wednesday night activities at our church. Or maybe your small group will help take on a task of decorating for VBS this summer. Or maybe you will help plant a bed of flowers for our new landscaping as our Journey Together project continues. Or maybe you'll volunteer at one of our ministry partners, a project with Keystone or Bridging or Arrive Ministries. Whatever that may be, that's going to be up to you and your group, but we just want to make sure that you as a group are committing to those kinds of practices together. It makes outreach and service more fun when we do it together with friends. The second thing I'd like to encourage your group to do is to consider the ways your group might be open to growth. What relationships are you as individuals building with unchurched people or people maybe on the fringe of church life that would benefit from experiencing your missional community and might lead to deeper belief in the gospel through your friendships and the relationships that form in your missional communities? I told the story once that my grandfather was not a churchgoer, wasn't raised with Christian faith, and when my grandmother and my mom became Christians, he really was not interested ever in coming to church. But that my grandmother started hosting a Bible study in their house, and over the years of just being around that small group, my grandpa kind of slowly came to faith. And he wasn't ever going to respond to an invitation to come to church. But by virtue of being exposed to this missional community that was my grandmother's small group Bible study, he came to hear the gospel and believe it for himself. So maybe your missional community will meet in a home or a coffee shop. You're certainly allowed to meet at a space here in the church. But, I just find that sometimes the environment for an unchurched person can be a real help or hindrance to their openness to experiencing Christian life. For a lot of us who love worshiping in the sanctuary, it's hard for us to understand that for a lot of other people, it can be very intimidating to step across the threshold of a church building. But it's much easier to respond to an invitation, come have dinner with my small group sometime, or come sit in with my missional community as we go do a project together at the food shelf. These are just ways that we can be reaching out to our neighbors more as a church and more as individuals. We do it better when we have friends that we're doing it with. The last thing I want to let you know is that Pastor Karina and I and Wendy and Karen and the rest of our Missional Life team really do want to be a resource to you for your missional community. If you're looking for help in picking books or topics that maybe you want to study together as a group, or helps kind of establishing a format for how your group gatherings might meet and function, please feel free to reach out to us. In fact, I would love to come and visit some of your missional communities sometimes, sit in with you on occasion just to hear a little bit of your stories, talk with you, and see how your missional community is thriving. So please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be sending out suggestions for books or topics you might want to be looking at that relate to our church life as a community at Roseville Covenant Church. But I also welcome your ideas too. If you've got thoughts and finding things that are working well in your missional community, just share those with us. And we'd love to spread that wisdom around so that more of us are having more deeper, authentic relationships in this church community, and as such are growing more Christ-like and finding more of our neighbors hear the gospel and grow in Christ themselves.